Hello everyone and welcome to Lokmanya. My name is Gauri and today we are going to talk to Ms. Namrata Hasija about the past, present and future of India-Taiwan relations. Ms. Namrata Hasija is a research associate at the Center for China Analysis and Strategy based in New Delhi. She is also the president of Taiwan Alumni Association of India. Her areas of expertise are Chinese foreign policy and India-Taiwan relations. Hi Namrata, welcome to Lokmanya. We are very happy to have you here.
Hi, Gauri. Thanks for this invitation and thank you for actually choosing a subject that is very close to my heart. And I've actually been working on a paper on India-Taiwan relations. So I think it gives me an opportunity also to let everyone know about
Mm-hmm.
Taiwan and this beautiful country that, I first visited in 2012,
Oh.
but then kept on visiting and stayed there for like 2 years,
Mm-hmm.
once into from 2000 in 2014, and then I just came back this year from Taiwan.
That's wonderful. I'm glad we are talking about this. For the common Indian, there is not much familiarity with Taiwan. We don't know much, beyond the fact that we have some trade relations, especially in the area of electronics. And their name has come up of late because of how they handled the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as, the anti-China sentiment. But is that it? I mean, is that all we have with Taiwan, or do we have a story with them? What do you think?
Taiwan dates back to it has a lot of it has settlements that we can confirm at least to 6,000 years ago. Even before that, it has. But
Okay.
6,000 years ago is like the recorded history. Of course, you have evidence of prehistoric era as well. So now
Mm-hmm.
this began when they have their aboriginals, people who were residing in this island before the Hans especially started migrating from the mainland China to Taiwan. So a
Okay.
group of farmers settled here, and they started doing agriculture here. And this group of farmers, of course, I mean, everybody says they are actually the ancestors of the aboriginals now.
Okay.
So these people started, and the Han Chinese fishermen, they started coming around to Pangu Island. Pangu Island is another small island that is within Taiwan. I mean,
Okay.
Taiwan, of course, is an island in
Hmm.
itself, but it has small islands around it. Like,
Hmm.
obviously, when we talk now of the geopolitics of South China Sea,
Mm-hmm.
less people are aware that actually the largest, not the man-made, how the PRC is making the man-made islands, but the actual biggest island of the South China Sea belongs to Taiwan. It doesn't belong to People's Republic of China. So now
Okay.
this Pangu Island, which is a little island, which comes under Taiwan. Now the Han Chinese, they started settling here, the fishermen.
Okay.
Now
Mm-hmm.
most of them were actually from Fujian district. So
Okay.
either few of the aboriginals mixed with them, or
Mm-hmm.
and the rest, they went to the mountains to live. Even now, when you travel to Taiwan, you go to the mountain region, you have these aboriginals. They have a very distinct um, culture, their food habits, everything is very different, and the way of life is very different.
Mm-hmm.
So actually, initially, before Chiang Kai-shek came in 1949, most of the people in Taiwan spoke Taiwanese, which is a Fujian dialect, because most of these
Okay.
people came from Fujian.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the Dutch East India Company, they came, they also made Pangu as a trading outpost in around, I think, somewhere in the 15th, 16th century. And
Okay.
the fort that they established is in the southern part of Taiwan, which
Mm-hmm.
still, the fort is still there, and
Okay.
it is called Anping. So
Okay.
they settled there, and that is how, the first traces of, foreigners coming are also kept intact in Taiwan. Now,
Mm-hmm.
after the Dutch, now what was happening in mainland China was that
Mm-hmm.
there was this Ming dynasty. Now, Ming dynasty was overthrown by the Qing dynasty. Qing dynasty is the last dynasty of China. So when the
Okay.
Mings were overthrown, the Ming
Mm-hmm.
dynasty, one of the Ming dynasty person. He was named as Kung Xia. Now
Okay.
he came to Taiwan, and he was a loyalist to the Ming Dynasty. So what he
Okay.
tried to do is he tried to kind of get together an army and everything, and he started ruling Taiwan. Now, before that, Taiwan was just a prefecture of Taiwan for the mainland China people. They kind of not something that they would pay attention to, but when a person who's escaped a former dynasty and still
Hmm.
calls him a Ming loyalist, he reaches here, then ultimately he is defeated by the Qing dynasty, and
Hmm.
Taiwan formally is made a part of Fujian province in the
Okay.
Qing dynasty. Okay, so all this will be also helpful when we try to understand what is the controversy now when it comes to Taiwan. Now,
Okay.
this when all this is happening, when the Qing dynasty has annexed this island Taiwan into their Fujian province.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in 1895, China loses a war to Japan. So
Yeah.
so Taiwan and all these little islands, Pangu and other islands, are given to the Japanese.
Okay.
So then Japanese rule starts in Taiwan. But
Okay.
you see, time to time, there were many rebellions in Taiwan
Mm-hmm.
and opposing this Japanese rule. But the
Mm-hmm.
Japanese developed initially the southern part of Taiwan, and the
Mm-hmm.
railways were there, and they introduced a formal education system there.
Okay.
Now, all this is happening, and whatever is happening in the mainland China, we'll go back to that later. But there is, of course, a tussle between the communists and the
Communists. The.
Republicans. And the Republicans are, of course, led by Chiang Kai shek.
Hmm.
So now, even before he comes to Taiwan, there is a controversy because the Taiwanese, they don't want Taiwan to, because the Japanese have handed over Taiwan back to Republic of China when they have lost the Second World War.
Okay.
Okay, so 1895, Taiwan goes to Japan because the Chinese lose a war, so the Japanese are ruling over it. But
Right.
but ultimately, when in 1945
45.
the Japanese
Yeah.
surrender, they
Right.
also give Taiwan back to Republic of China.
China. Okay.
Okay, so now, but there's also a controversy there whether actually it was handed over, because the Japanese say we are leaving Taiwan. They never said to whom are they handing it over to, or
Oh.
what will be, how Taiwan will be after they leave. Now,
So did
Chiang
not have a
Kai-shek
treaty
feels
or anything?
they did have a treaty, but there were no, the Treaty of Cairo was there, but actually there are no clear terms in that. So a lot
Okay.
of manipulation can be done. So now Republic
Okay.
of China, which is being led by Chiang Kai-shek, he feels that this is part of mainland
Mainland
China.
China.
Now,
Oh.
after whatever happens in the mainland China, Chiang Kai-shek flies to Taiwan. This huge migration is there of people from mainland China to Taiwan.
Taiwan.
They also carry a lot of Chinese historical, what to say, all the
Artifacts.
historical artifacts and also documents. Even
Okay.
the South China Sea documents. The mainland China, the PRC always says that South China Sea is ours, but the
Hmm.
original documents are with the Taiwanese.
Taiwan.
Now, when he comes to Taiwan, there is a different history of Taiwan that starts. In the sense, Taiwan comes to the international limelight because
Okay.
all the governments, even the American government, they recognize Republic of China as the legitimate government of China. And
Okay.
Chiang Kai-shek also feels that this is just a temporary base for him
Okay.
in Taiwan, and ultimately he's going to go back to mainland China and defeat after defeating the communists. Of course,
Okay.
which never happens, and he stays in Taiwan, and there's a martial law in Taiwan. So after
Okay.
1949 begins another journey of Taiwan, where many people, old people especially, I used to talk to them just sitting on the bus stops and all in Taiwan when I was traveling. Very few of them actually liked Chiang Kai-shek because they said
Oh.
that they were forced to learn Mandarin. It was not their
Okay.
language, and all of them came here
Mm-hmm.
and made Taiwan just as a base. They had no real love for Taiwan, as because they always
Mm-hmm.
thought that they are here in Taiwan only on a temporary basis, and they will go back to mainland China. This also
Right.
kind of fits into and kind of fuels the current um, nationalism debate or identity crisis that is there in Taiwan, because there are people who are there before 1949, and there are people who came in 1949 from mainland China who
Mm-hmm.
feel that ultimately they should be reunified with the mainland China. Then there are generations that are actually born in Taiwan who say that we're not Chinese, we are Taiwanese.
Yes.
So
Right.
there are many layers to and many complexities in Taiwanese society. But Chiang
Mm-hmm.
Kai-shek was the president of Republic of China. Now he invited, as I mentioned, Mr. Jawaharlal Nehru to India when he was at that point of time a member of the Indian National Congress. So he
Okay.
wanted him to, because of course it's 1939, India is still under the British. So, but he
Yes.
still invites him, and he tells him to come to China and stay there for a month, and also kind of support China against Japan, because
Mm-hmm.
Japan is looked upon, of course, by the Chinese as an imperialist country,
Yeah.
because they are the ones who are attacking the Chinese. And of course, all of us know the massacre and everything that happened,
Yeah.
when the Japanese came. So, however, this visit was cut short because the Second World War started,
Started.
and Mr. Nehru had to come back to India. But this started a kind of a correspondence between the Chiang couple and Mr. Jawaharlal Nehru.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the letters that they write to each other, it discusses developments in India, in China, around the world, along with you see a personal bond that is there between Chiang Kai-shek and especially Madam Chiang Kai-shek and Jawaharlal Nehru. And of
Mm-hmm.
course, these letters do tell you about the close friendship that they have. Now, Thai Chit Thao, he comes to India in 1940, as I said. He's this official, he's the head of examination yuan in China, and he comes and visits Gandhiji. But Gandhiji very categorically, he says that we can be with you in spirit, but we can never be, we can never help you, because he is this person who believes in non-violence. So he says, I cannot help you with men, I cannot help you in any military way. But yes, in spirit, India and China are very close, and we will continue, this relationship, and we'll keep praying for each other's, health, and that our countries prosper and everything.
Right.
So now this meeting goes on, and he goes back, Thai Chut Thao goes back. Now in 1942, Madam Chiang Kai-shek and General Chiang Kai-shek, they visit India. Now they come to
Okay.
Calcutta, and they
Okay.
visit Calcutta. And this also, see, there's another thing that is happening on the sidelines is when he comes to Calcutta, he actually goes to Shanti Niketan. Actually, Chiang Kai-shek, General Chiang Kai-shek is the one who starts this China Bhavan that we know
Okay.
of now in Shanti Niketan, which is the
Right.
first Mandarin language center in India
Okay.
that was established. He is the one who gives money, gives
Mm-hmm.
donation to start this. He also donates a lot of books for this center, and he
Mm-hmm.
starts this center. And there's also Professor Tan Yun Shan from mainland China who stays then in China Bhavan and starts teaching Mandarin there.
Okay.
So, of course, now the PRC kind of hijacked everything, and they say it is they who kind of started this, and China Bhavan and all. But it was actually
Chiang
Chiang
Kai-shek.
Kai-shek who started all this. And then he also insisted that he really wants to meet Gandhiji, but Nehru at that time was in prison, and
Okay.
so he could not meet both of them. But
Mm-hmm.
somehow a meeting, the Britishers did not want this meeting to happen between Gandhi and the Chiang couple. But somehow this meeting happened. Both of them met. Their pictures, and
Okay.
they discussed whatever is happening and everything. So there is a letter which Madam Chiang Kai-shek actually writes in 1942.
Mm-hmm.
So I will quote from this letter. She says that generalismo is how General Chiang Kai-shek is referred, is
Okay.
replying to Gandhi's letter, but has
Hmm.
asked to her to advise Gandhi and the Congress against launching of any movement pending the result of Chiang Kai-shek's negotiation with the USA, informs him that Generalismo is doing his best for India, and telegrams are shuttling to and fro from China and Washington, and they might take advantage of Churchill's visit to the USA. Now, this
Okay.
letter will tell you that it's not only just the friendship that we are discussing between them, but they are also discussing a lot of things, and a lot of things are happening in the background. So this will tell you that Chiang Kai-shek is actually talking. That's what he's informing that them that he's talking to USA, and USA will then talk to Britain and kind of get the assurance that if India does not start any movement, and here they refer to the Quit India movement,
Right.
that if they don't start any movement, they will kind of consider India's independence after the Second World War is over.
I was just making an observation. We study the
Hmm.
independence struggle through school, through college, but we never get to hear about our interactions with the Chinese during that period. I mean, we even learn about
Yes.
Japan thanks to Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose.
Hmm.
We never learn about China. And what you just said, it's a completely new kind of dimension altogether, which never comes in front of us through formal education.
Yeah, I mean, of course, there are many things that don't come into light through our formal education.
Right,
But
right.
because we were just talking about how Chiang Kai-shek was writing this letter. Even
Mm-hmm.
on 18th October 1940, Chiang Kai-shek, he actually kind of stresses the need for a united struggle by Asians.
Okay.
This
Mm-hmm.
pan-Asianism and this Asian solidarity that he talks about. And he talks about this, and he puts, this Thaichur Thao's 1940 visit to India in that context. But
Okay.
I think, of course, we do have the Asian Conference in 1947, and we also kind of, Mr. Nehru also, his ideas of pan-Asianism and his idea of Asian solidarity also start from here. And he also formulates a lot of things, because his knowledge of China is also immense, because even from prison he used to write letters to Mrs. Indira Gandhi, I mean his daughter, and there
Yeah.
he writes about China. He informs her, how Chinese civilization is, and so it comes through it that he kind of had he genuinely liked the Chinese civilization for whatever reason. I mean, he has his own reasons for that.
Right.
And there are also many letters that Madam Chiang Kai-shek, she writes to Nehru, and these letters are also very interesting, because she goes to the US and she comes back, and she buys a Rolex watch for Mr. Nehru from there, and he says, I'm sending you this and I hope you like it. And she
Mm-hmm.
again kind of invites him to come to China, and she says, you know um, we'll go to the mountains, we'll read there, we'll chat, and we'll see the sun setting. Why don't you come? And that the kind of friendship that they have, even after India refuses to acknowledge the Republic of China, when they move to Taiwan in 1949, she actually writes letter to Mrs. Vijay Lakshmi Pandit, and she kind of asks her to support Kuomintang and to support Republic of China, because they had this friendship
Right.
with Mr. Nehru. They had this friendship with India, and I mean that's what with my interaction with Taiwanese scholars, few of them always say that General Chiang Kai-shek was the most disappointed when India refused
I
to
could imagine
acknowledge
that.
Republic of China, and India became actually the first non-communist country to recognize the People's Republic of China.
Right.
I think somewhere Panditji had the intuition that
Mm-hmm.
Chiang Kai-shek's government will not last in China,
Okay.
and the
Okay.
communists will definitely, come to power in China. Now, why
Okay.
I say this is because there is a letter
Hmm.
that he writes to KPS Menon in 1947, and I will
Mm-hmm.
quote from the letter. He says, and KPS Menon actually, says this, that Panditji did realize that the Kuomintang regime was a corrupt regime. And worse than corrupt, it did not live up to the ideals of Dr. Sun Yat-sen, the founder of Chinese Republic. I must say, I was amazed at Panditji's intuition and knowledge as to what was happening in China. In fact, he made a rather strange suggestion to me. He said that if I got a chance, I should get in touch with Mao Zedong or Chou En-lai or this group in Yan'an. And this is in 1947. And of course, he says that KPS Menon, says that the nationalist government, and especially Chiang Kai-shek, would be really angry if I do anything like this. And of course, there's also this thing that we don't talk about, but actually that it is also believed that, and there's also a memorial there in Taiwan, where they believe that Subhash Chandra Bose, his plane crashed in Taipei, and actually not anywhere else. So they also have a memorial at Songshan Airport in Taiwan, which is dedicated to Subhash Chandra Bose. And I mean, they say that the Japanese actually took his ashes away from there, but they have built this memorial in his, in his memory. We also had this Asian conference in 1947, and I would kind of like to bring that in, because that is the first time that India and China had a problem because of Tibet. Because India kind of invited the Tibetan delegates as delegates from an independent country. And the representatives from Republic of China who were there, they were not happy at all. And in fact, one of them stood up and he kind of, the map that was there of Asia, he kind of took a chalk and he redrew it and showed Tibet as part of China. Our relationship started when General Chiang Kai-shek was there, and it was he who actually went to Taiwan and started, then Taiwan became Republic of China. So we do have to talk about it when we talk about India-ROC relationship. But I think Taiwan requires a different treatment, and of course, to be considered as a different country. And India-Taiwan relations, to me, would only begin when we establish offices in each other's country in 1995. And in fact, this year we are celebrating the 25 years of our unofficial relationship.
So I think you've given a very comprehensive background of how things came to be. And I do have one question though, that is, once Nehru recognized PRC, but did not recognize Taiwan, from then to 1995, what has been the situation? I mean, we did not have ties with them, but was there any other kind of interaction, maybe educational, maybe cultural, economic, some kind of interaction?
No, we had no interaction as such, but Formosa, which is also another name of Taiwan, did come up in our official interaction. Why? Because there are so many letters that are Jawaharlal Nehru letters that I have read, where officially we mention about Formosa, we mention about Tibet, but we also always mention that Formosa is part of China.
Okay. And, what about his successors? What about
Chiang Kai-shek?
No. What about Nehru's successors? Our other prime ministers, did they take up the issue? Did they do anything?
No. I know for one fact, of course, that there was a bit of an interaction that started after we had a war with China in 1962.
Okay.
And there were attempts of renewing this relationship, and also there are few details that came to light, that even the maps and all that we kind of got when we were at war with China, we actually gave it to ROC for kind of helping us with all those maps and everything. So there was an attempt. There is a window of 4-5 years when there are kind of secret meetings or interaction with the Taiwanese government. but that has not come into light. Under the Look East policy, we decided to establish not official relations, but unofficial relations. We started with Taiwan. They established an office here, which is called the Taipei Economic and Cultural Center, and we have an office in Taipei. So, but both these offices initially were tasked only as an economic and cultural link that we are going to start with Taiwan. And in fact, I'll quote Prime Minister P.V. Narasimha Rao's quote here when he actually told his officials to start this office. He said, "Be careful, we are doing this, but not at any point of time should we offend China or People's Republic of China. With our whatever dealings we are having with Taiwan, they should never come in the way of our relationship with PRC." Yeah.
So we've come to a very interesting cusp in history where, you know, India and Republic of China were becoming very good friends. They had this vision of Pan-Asianism, and then that was thwarted for decades. And now we are again at a point where, you know, things have started to pick up, even though unofficially. But, you know, it looks like that the door is opening again. And we'll come back next time to discuss about, you know, what happened when we started back, our interactions with them, and how did they progress, and what are we doing now. So I would say let's take this up for our next episode. And again, thank you so much for coming and talking to us. This has been amazing.
Thank you.